Thank you so much, Yusuf. Shukran and salam alaikum, everyone. Welcome, excellencies and distinguished guests. Hope you enjoyed a fantastic lunch, and we're going to kick off this afternoon's session with a really exciting fireside. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. He is Pierre Le Manh. He is the president and the CEO of the PMI, the Project Management Institute. Now, under his leadership since September 2022, the PMI has been at the forefront of preparing project management professionals for the rapidly evolving landscape. We all heard about AI, we know about that, all the way through to the other potential disruptors that are hitting all of our industries as we go forward. Now, as we explore the future trends in this fireside in project management, Pierre is going to share his insights into what makes a project successful in today's world. Of course, we're going to be emphasizing sustainability and the essential skills that professionals need going forward to thrive in 2025 and beyond. So it gives me great pleasure, and if you could put your hands together to give him a warm welcome, Pierre Le Manh, for what promises to be a very enlightening fireside on the future trends in project management. Welcome, Pierre. Please make yourself comfortable and take a seat. Lovely to see you again.
How are you doing?
I'm extremely well.
Hello, everyone.
And he's fresh in from New York to give us words of wisdom. And I was really struck, Pierre, when I read your bio. Of course, many people in the room know you, but I was really struck by the multi-sectorial approach to your journey throughout the industry. And I thought, even though, of course, people can look at your bio, I'd love to just kind of skip through some key elements that have helped you to be able to help project management professionals, a couple of the lessons, I guess, you learned along the way.
You know, before even talking about my professional journey, what shaped me is my personal journey. I'm Asian by heritage, European by culture, American by choice. And having lived and worked in many different cultures has actually helped me shape my understanding of the world. You're right to say, I never planned to change sectors like this, but I always felt like when I was leaving a company, I didn't want to work for a competitor. So I changed sectors that way, but I always said in the knowledge economy, working both on in B2C businesses or other where I had clients, and so had the chance to see many companies, many markets, many industries. And in the end, when you do all of this, you realize that what is the most important is people. So we all know that. We like our companies, we like our teams because of the people we work with. We love our clients because of the people, our partners because of that. But I spent a lot of my time understanding people as my profession, working in data analytics, in market research, in consumer insights. And understanding people helps you understand where the world is going, at least a little better. And I think that's been important for me as a CEO. I've been running companies as a CEO for now more than 25 years? It's actually more than 25 years, 27 years. First time was in 1998. And so going through all these sectors, but still working in knowledge economy and understanding people has helped me get a perspective and some convictions about where the world is going. And that's what I'm bringing to the table, I think.
So let's dive down into that, because as you said, and we heard it in the panel just before lunch, we don't want to overcomplicate things sometimes, and at the essence, I think sometimes in business we forget about the element of humanity, so thank you for sort of re-highlighting that. But when we think about future trends, again, in the session before lunch, we were hearing about, and I'm a great fan of this, where are we now? And as we will talk about now, we'll get excited about that future trends, but where do you see project management at this moment in time?
Well, the project economy grows slightly faster than the global GDP because the world needs a lot of transformation. So we're seeing needs everywhere. You have geopolitical transformations that reshape supply chains, reshape industrial strategies in many markets, starting with the US, where I live. You have many areas of the world that needs to rebuild different societies, and we see a lot of that here in the Middle East, for instance. So definitely there is a lot of momentum in how many projects there are and the size of those projects. And then we have some obvious disruptions. You mentioned sustainability. Clearly, the climate emergency, climate change is driving a lot of investments, a lot of thinking, a lot of risk management. It's interesting, by the way, that at the time when the new administration comes in the US, we have these events in Los Angeles that make the US population rethink maybe there are some real challenges with climate that we need to address. So that is definitely driving a lot of demand for projects, lots of investments, and lot of interest in project management. And then we have the whole AI revolution, of course, which is reshaping so many businesses, and that, of course, has a huge influence on project management, right? So we are in this moment when we grow faster than the economy. There are huge needs due to our geopolitical reshaping and some massive disruptions, starting with climate emergency and AI, that drive so much need for projects and so much demand that we are really surfing a good wave. Now it's on us, project professionals, to surf that wave positively and be the shapers of the future that we want to be.
So let's tease out some of those elements, because as you said, the audience is sat here. We keep getting these banners of AI, and I'm sure many people in the room are using it within their work already. But let's kick off with that one to begin with, because I've been party to so many conversations on AI, from the skeptics all the way through to people, of course, that are thinking it's going to revolutionize the way we do things. Where do you stand on that scale, and particularly in relation to project management?
How many of you use AI every single day in your jobs? Raise your hand. Okay, so it's about 57%, I think, more or less.
Yeah.
You know, when Goldman Sachs 5 years ago came up with this report, and they said 80% of project managers' jobs will disappear because of AI, it scared off everyone. But we had no clue, right, whether this would happen or not, and we still don't exactly know the effect of that. But then 2 years ago, after the big boom of generative AI, we asked a huge sample of project professionals worldwide, do you think that AI is going to have a massive impact or a very significant impact on your job? And 90% of project professionals at the time said, yes, we do, or yes, I do. But at the same time, only 20%.
Do you mean in a negative way, as in it's going to affect me, as in I'm not so valuable, or it's going to affect me in I'm going to be more productive kind of way?
At the time, you know, it's like depends on your own personality. Some people see the opportunities, some people see the risk, some people lie to themselves, don't want to see the risk. You know, everything can happen. But 90% were saying this is going to affect my job. And at the time, only 20% of project professionals were using AI. Regularly, so I think we asked at the time once a week at least, or once a day. Now we've moved, a year later, we've moved to over 40%, so over 40% of project professionals worldwide are using AI every day.
We're in line
their jobs.
In the room.
Yeah, but this
good.
Room is very advanced, you know, they're the elite of our profession, so that's kind of normal. And you know, PMI, we were created in 1969, and it was basically a few people who were working in very different industries, some in construction, infrastructure, aerospace, pharma, you name it. And they came together with the idea of trying to exchange best practices and see if they could use what the others had learned doing their jobs for themselves, right? So very early on, there was this idea of being a community that shares, that learns together, and that wants to be the leading authority in the end in our profession. So that's what PMI is, right? The leading authority in the world of project management. So when AI started its recent boom, it's not the first time we're seeing a boom in AI, but that one is much bigger than before. We felt that PMI had to be, on one side, leading the AI transformation of project management, but also, on the other hand, make sure that we lead the project management of the AI transformation of the world, right? So we followed those two routes at PMI, and on the first part of it, so leading the AI transformation of project management, we invested a lot in developing courses. We have already 4 courses, 90,000 people have taken them already. We have a 5th course coming on construction, so application of AI to project management in construction. We launched our platform, PMI Infinity, which is basically a tool that project professionals can use to help them do their job. It's a very safe environment. Whatever you upload there is going to stay on a very specific instance, and it's all content that has been vetted by our community. We have a lot of content at PMI, as you can imagine, coming from all these years of working together. So that's what we've been doing, plus thought leadership and events to prepare our profession and to help professionals really make the best of the usage of AI.
So it sounds like, from what you're saying, it's safely on board. AI, yeah, we're on board with that. As you say, we've got the courses going on. I don't want that to just be the focal point, of course. We're on the 10th year anniversary here, and AI, a big part of the conversation, which it should be. But of course, other disruptors coming as well. So given it's our 10-year anniversary, if we look forward maybe 10 years from now, what do you think the other disruptors that are on your horizon that you're already starting to plan for?
Well, if I knew that, I would be very rich. And I would share with you, so we're all very rich. So it's very difficult to predict a disruption of the magnitude of something like AI. But I think, I'm sorry, but I want to stay a little bit on AI because I think it's very important that we don't see this as a fad. When people ask me what is the next disruption, I feel almost that the reason for the question is if we feel, well, this is news today, tomorrow is going to be something else. I don't believe that 1 second. I think this is a massive transformation of our profession, and even beyond our profession, a massive transformation of knowledge work. A lot of what AI is doing is going to indeed not necessarily replace the job, but replace the tasks that we're doing today. Even my task as a CEO, many of them are going to be automated or augmented or improved with the usage of AI. So it calls for a complete rethinking of knowledge work, what it means, what remains human, what is not going to be human anymore in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And by the way, it's interesting, people say AI will never replace humans when it comes to creativity. I don't agree with that. I think AI is pretty good at being creative. Or we say AI is going to be more empathetic, will never be empathetic as much as humans. I don't necessarily agree with this either, frankly. I've never been to a psychologist or anything like that, but when I talk to ChatGPT sometimes or other AI tools, it feels like this is my emotional support or whatever.
Yeah, and I listened to one the other day.
It's very good at empathy. It makes empathy, but human beings do as well, right? So it's not very specific to AI. But I feel, on the other hand, accountability will still be there. You still have to be accountable for your job. The tool is not going to be accountable. You have to have the commitment, the motivation. This morning we heard Arsene Wenger explain what makes the big difference between an average player, a great player, is the level of commitment. Your commitment to your job, your commitment to project success is going to make the big difference. And then, of course, we might work less in time, but to stay on top, we'll have to spend a lot of time developing ourselves, improving ourselves, and learning, so that's going to take some of our time that maybe you won't spend doing executional tasks.
So I know that you just completed a huge project when it comes to looking at what drives the success of projects. So can you give us a little insight into what you found and maybe some helpful tips for people to take home?
Yeah, by way of context, so we run that big research project. We started with a group of 17 experts from the academia, from of course, practitioners, and some people from the C-suite as well. And they drove the design of the research that we conducted. We had about 150 in-person interviews, and then we interviewed 10,000 professionals. Some of you probably have answered that research and contributed to that big effort. What we wanted to do here is to own the definition of project success, when in the past, in fact, we've let a lot of other people than our profession define what it is. Right? We've let academics do that, we've let consultants do that, and we have not spent enough time ourselves defining what is project success. And I believe we have to own that. So that's why we launched that big research. We have a full report that is available. If you go to the pmi.org website, you can download it for free, even if you're not a member. It's available to everyone. What I really found interesting in that research is, first of all, a reframing of what project success means. So we came up with this new expression of it. A successful project brings value that was worth the cost and expense. So it's interesting because it's an equation, right? So you have to manage the equation. It's also, in a way, saying that the triple constraints, this idea of time or schedule, budget, and scope, respecting that is great, that's execution, but you have to go beyond that and manage the perception of the value that is created, and even the perception of the effort and expense, right? So it's a significant shift in how we approach the role of project professionals and how we see the profession. And honestly, as you were asking before, what is the next big thing? We don't know what the next big thing is, but our job is to prepare our profession, make sure that our profession will be able to expand, broaden its vision of project management, of project work, and broaden the vision we have for the project profession, so that whatever happens, we're equipped to manage these changes and navigate all these disruptions that are happening.
Now, I know it's an overused word both in your industry and others, agile, but it sounds like that is the definition of being even more agile going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because we recently integrated Agile Alliance in PMI. Agile Alliance is in fact the organization that some of the authors of the Agile Manifesto in software development had created after they came up with this incredibly influential manifesto in 2001. So we integrated Agile Alliance, and then we had an interesting chatter on social media about this integration and what it meant. And so project professionals in general were super happy about it, because project management for many years has had interest in Agile and see how we can implement that, integrate it. Of course, it depends on the sector, depends on the type of projects. Everybody understands that, even the culture a little bit, everybody understands that, but the integration of Agile as part of the principles that are promoted by PMI and by project management has been there for a long time. But then I realized when we made this acquisition that the Agile community did not necessarily understand project management. They portray project management as a fairly narrow waterfall, as they say, approach. So basically you make a plan and then you stick to the plan. That's it. Yeah. Again, depending on the project, the context of the project, sometimes you do have to do that to an extent, but yes, the ability to adjust, to be flexible, to reassess constantly what is the value that you're creating and what is the scope, how you change that, how you minimize waste. This flexibility is, of course, very important for project success.
And all of this is going on behind a backdrop, as we know in this region and just globally, of big societal challenges. We'll pick up on the sustainability element in a minute, because I think that deserves a question of its own. But how is the PMI going to embed itself in the societal changes and challenges that we have at the moment?
We have to, first of all, because the new generations of project professionals and the new generations of professionals in general are, with, of course, caveats and differences depending on the country and the region and their background, but generally speaking, the younger generations are very, very, very conscious about the need to develop sustainable practices. And when I'm mentioning different cultures, so different cultures have different kind of ways to see the solution. If you take Europe, there is the belief that we need to change the way we consume, the way we act as citizens, to change the demand. In the US, people see it a little differently. There's a lot of belief in technology, the power of technology, so the idea is that we can't change the way we are as human beings, so let's innovate, let's find technological solutions that will fix the problem, and then we can keep living the life, consuming even more. It's actually a very pragmatic way of seeing things. I'm actually, although, like I said, European by culture, I kind of understand the idea that we have here. So for us, PMI, we have to embrace sustainability because otherwise we'll be irrelevant to those young generations. But we also have to make sure that when you're a project professional and you want to, for instance, implement sustainable practices in your projects, you come to PMI to get some inspiration, best practices, can talk to others, and be able to do that better.
And how about the methodological standpoint and frameworks? Because as you said, you kind of need to have some order and you need to have frameworks, but at the same time, it sounds like the ability to move within those needs to be greater than ever. Is that a summary? Would that be correct?
Yeah, so PMI used to be very prescriptive in how to approach a project, and then because of the development of Agile and understanding that the world is getting very complex, we've made almost a cultural move and shift. That predates me a few years back. And for some of you, those of you who know the PMI methods and books and content very well, there was a defining moment when PMBOK 6 was replaced by PMBOK 7, when we really clearly articulated that we were a principle-based organization. So we're focused on principles. Doesn't mean that you should not learn methodologies. We actually encourage people to learn as many methodologies as possible and practice them. So learn, I don't know, Scale, learn Scrum, learn Waterfall, learn whatever you want. But stay on the principle level because we believe that to elevate our profession, to broaden our vision for the profession and for project work, we need to be able to combine all of these techniques and methodologies and frameworks and elevate the way we manage and lead projects that way. So we're principle-based, we're not methodology.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if that pressure, maybe pressure is the wrong word, but demand is coming from your clients as well, because they want an ever more bespoke approach. They don't want to see anything they believe might be downloaded from a server and just some names changed. They want a more bespoke approach, and maybe their problems are more bespoke.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, Sarah. You know, I constantly hear people saying my project is unique, my situation is unique, my company is unique, and I worked with so many companies before in a different industry. Everybody feels that they're unique. The problem with that, look back in 1969 when the few people I was referring to before, if they had thought my industry is unique because construction is different than aerospace, and because aerospace has nothing to do with healthcare, and healthcare is different than tech, we would never have created PMI. Actually, we would probably not even be here in this room today, because learning in the end is still trying to find patterns, ideas that you can import and re-implement somewhere else, right? So I do agree with the need of customization. You have to be able to customize your approach, but it's extremely important that we also look at the commonalities and the things that can be reapplied.
Yeah, I guess I'm an investment analyst by trade and a financier, so these certain systems, I understand how to operate in them, and the way you talk about that certainly makes a lot of sense to me. Think about that. If you say, I am unique, then you can't learn anything from anyone. No, because we're all unique. Yeah. If you're unique, then what does it mean? Like everything else is irrelevant to me, to my situation? No, it's not like that, right? So there's a unique combination, maybe, that is yours, but the ingredients, the principles have to come from somewhere else, right? And you have to learn that. So then my challenge to you going forward to 2025, I know I'm asking you some big questions here and you won't have all the answers to them, is what skills do you think people really need, particularly this methodology that's flexing, and you know, there's going to be people here that have got a very, not a set way of doing things, a very experienced way of doing things. And then there's the younger generation sat here as well. Where do you see the perfect combination for that skill set, like I say, for 2025 and beyond? So we are expected as project professionals to know how to manage a project, right? So the idea, the concept that you can forget about all of this, just focus on leadership. No, you have to learn the basics. And the basics get more and more complicated by the day. Now you're helped because now you have AI, so the knowledge can be delegated a little bit to a tool, right? But you still need to understand the big picture here, which means you got to learn all the time, stay current. Like I said before, maybe we'll be more productive, do less executional work, but the learning part is going to grow, in my opinion,
in spite of all the tools, right? It's just you have to learn how to manage them, where to find the information, how to synthesize all of that. We have our last AI course is called AI use. It's about the use cases of AI applied to project management. I recommend it's a free course for all members. I actually recommend you take a look at that, because when you go through this, then you realize that you have a lot to learn. Whatever is your current situation, your current understanding of AI, there are so many different LLMs, so many different use cases you can learn every single day. So there's a lot to learn here. Now, which leads me to let's say the flip side of that. You learn how to leverage AI, for instance, but then it shows how much your critical thinking has to go up as well, right? So the way I see it is, AI is going to help us raise the floor, which means that almost everybody will be able to do basic stuff. Writing minutes of a meeting, everybody can do that now. You have AI to help you do that. So the floor will be raised. Now the problem is, how do you raise the ceiling? And that will require a lot of critical thinking, ability to understand the world. You have to almost create your own understanding of the world, way beyond project management, so you can synthesize all of that and use that to lead your projects much better, right? So I believe in that. I believe in progressively learning how to speak the language of the C-suite. Many project professionals complain about the lack of recognition. It's probably not true in all industries. If you're in infrastructure, if you're in construction, like many of you here, you don't necessarily suffer from that because you're managing very projects, very critical. But people who work on smaller projects, sometimes they lack the recognition. If you can learn to speak the language of business, learn to speak the language of the C-suite, manage their expectation, manage their perception of success, then you are going to elevate your ceiling as well. So
let's not keep it secret, because there's people out there going, so how am I going to communicate better in the C-suite? I know, because I work in communication as well. But maybe let's think of 3 things if people are going to go to the C-suite, particularly if they're going there the first time. It's a very time-strapped environment that demands answers quickly with proof points quickly. So what would be your advice? Yeah,
you have 20 seconds to earn 2 minutes to explain your 20 minutes thing, and then maybe you get 2 hours or even more. So you have to think that way, how can I hook in 20 minutes? You have to be very natural. People tend to be too complicated when they are under pressure. The C-suite usually doesn't know anything about what you're doing, so dumb it down. Dumb it down. I always think about my grandma. She passed now, very smart woman, but if I thought my grandma would not understand this, probably it's not a good way to explain it.
Yeah,
right?
And I think if you can explain things in everyday language, then it means you really do know your stuff, doesn't it? And I think I was definitely guilty of this when I first started out in investment banking at 20-odd years of age. I thought the more I said, the more knowledgeable I would look, but I realize now in my ripe old age, the less you say. So 3 key messages, would you say, with some proof points, would kind of enable people to marshal resources and have influence in the C-suite?
Yeah, you have to speak in a very simple way. Speak the language of business. Spend the time to understand that a C-suite executive typically doesn't speak the language of benefits. They don't even understand what that exactly means. They think it's probably some payroll thing, not a project benefit. So it's all about market shares, growth, understanding the big picture of the objectives that your organization has, and then speaking that language in a very simple way. It's not rocket science, trust me.
No, and ROI is pretty key to all that. So look, we've run around.
There's another thing. You have to manage to be a little interesting. In the end, if you don't say anything that is interesting, people won't remember you. So that's why spending time developing your own understanding of the world beyond your technicity is so important when you want to talk to the C-suite.
And I think you touch on a really important point there, which is context. Because as you said, sometimes we all get our head down, don't we? And we start focusing on something. But putting that into a global context or a sectorial context is probably really important for the C-suite. Well, Pierre, we've got 23 seconds, so I'm not going to overrun. But if you thought about sort of one piece of advice to give out people we've talked about elements there, but not to be overwhelmed, what do you think they should maybe prioritize?
I think each of you has to find how you want to prioritize in this big set of opportunities that we have, this big incredible opportunity we have right now to make our profession shine with AI, with all the disruptions that we talked about before. what I think is very important is that each of us, as a profession, are ambitious. You know, we have to be very ambitious for our profession because now is the time. With all these disruptions, there is so much need for transformation that we can be there, we can be a trailblazing profession. So let's have this ambition, and let's have this ambition individually also for ourselves to raise our own ceiling.
Well, Pierre, thank you so much for running us through the key landscapes and the future trends there for PMI. So thank you so much for joining us. A big round of applause for Pierre for joining us today, and shukran jazilan, and thank you for your time today.